The young and the restless spoilers. Victor Newman sat behind his massive mahogany desk, staring out the window of his high-rise office with a look of disdain. The skyline of Genoa City seemed distant, blurry, as if it were a reflection of his thoughts, clouded with frustration and disappointment. His mind kept returning to the same problem, circling around it like a predator stalking its prey. The problem wasn't the competition or corporate politics this time. It was Kyle Abbott. Kyle had been a critical piece in Victor's grand plan, a pawn placed at the helm of Glissade as its CEO, with the task of infiltrating and undermining the company's competitors. But what had Kyle done? Squandered the opportunity, failed to deliver, and in Victor's eyes become a complete disappointment. Victor expected precision, excellence, and loyalty, but Kyle had offered none of those things. Instead, he had gotten tangled in personal affairs, treating his role as a game, rather than the strategic position of power it was meant to be. Victor sighed, his thoughts drifting to the chaos Kyle had caused. The boy had proven himself to be reckless, foolish even. Kyle's failures were beginning to pile up, and worst of all, his behavior was completely unacceptable. He was playing with fire, toying with two of Victor's beloved granddaughters, Summer and Claire, without any regard for their emotions. It was despicable. Kyle's flirtations, his manipulation of their affections, was not just an insult to the Newman family, but a direct slap in Victor's face. Victor's patience had worn thin. The longer Kyle stayed in his position at Glissade, the more damage he seemed to do, to the company, to the family, and to himself. It was time for Victor to make a decisive move. The sharp ring of Victor's office phone pulled him out of his thoughts. He picked it up, his voice firm and cold. "Get Claire and Summer in my office. Now." Minutes later, Summer and Claire walked in, both of them sensing the gravity of the situation. Victor rarely called them together like this unless it was something serious. His demeanor told them everything. They were about to hear something they wouldn't like. Victor wasted no time. "Sit down, both of you," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. As they took their seats, Victor's gaze pierced through them, the weight of his words already hanging in the air. "I've called you here because it's time you both understand something about Kyle Abbott. That boy has no respect for you, either of you. He's been playing with your hearts, treating you like pawns in his own personal game, and I won't allow it any longer." Summer's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. She had always known Kyle was reckless, but hearing it from her grandfather's mouth made it sting even more. Claire, on the other hand, looked down, trying to hide the pain in her eyes. Both women had been caught in Kyle's web, each thinking they could be the one to tame him, to make him commit. But Victor wasn't here to comfort them. He was here to tell them the truth, no matter how harsh it sounded. "You need to distance yourselves from Kyle. He's not worth your time or your affection. As long as he's around, neither of you will find the happiness or peace you deserve." Claire opened her mouth to protest, but Victor held up his hand. "I know what you're going to say, but trust me, I've seen men like Kyle my whole life. He's a liability. He'll drag you both down if you let him, and I won't stand by and watch it happen." Summer and Claire exchanged a look. They knew Victor was right. Deep down, they had both seen the signs. Kyle's charm, his smooth words, and his handsome exterior masked the reality. He was unreliable, immature, and too focused on his own desires to care about anyone else. Victor leaned back in his chair, his gaze hardening. "As for Kyle's role at Glissade, that's over. I've already made the decision to remove him from the position. Effective immediately, Kyle Abbott is no longer CEO of Glissade." The shockwave of Victor's words hit both women at once. Summer's eyes widened in disbelief. Claire gasped softly, unable to hide her surprise. Kyle had been such a prominent figure at Glissade. For Victor to fire him so abruptly seemed unthinkable. But Victor wasn't finished. "Kyle has proven himself incapable of handling the responsibility I gave him. He's been nothing but a disappointment. Glissade needs someone strong, someone who can take control and get things done. That's why I've brought Audra back to take over as CEO. This time, she'll be running the company on her own, with full autonomy." Summer's heart sank. Audra had always been a strong contender, someone who had earned Victor's respect through her intelligence and cunning. If anyone could turn Glissade around, it was her. But this move also solidified the fact that Kyle was being pushed out, not just of the company, but perhaps from the family's inner circle as well. Victor's face softened slightly as he looked at Summer and Claire. I know this may be difficult for you both. Kyle's been a part of your lives for a long time, but sometimes you need to let go of people who no longer serve you. You'll both be better off without him. Trust me. Summer nodded slowly, her mind reeling from the news. Claire sat silently, processing everything. Victor's words carried a finality that neither of them could argue with. As the meeting ended, Victor watched them leave his office, his mind already moving forward. The decision to remove Kyle had been necessary. The boy had lost sight of his priorities, and in the world of business and family, there was no room for weakness. Victor had learned that lesson long ago, and now Kyle was learning it the hard way. But would Kyle accept it? Would he take his firing as a wake-up call and try to redeem himself? Or would his anger and resentment drive him to lash out, to strike back at Victor and everyone who had supported him? Victor knew the answer even before the question had fully formed in his mind. Kyle's anger, his pride, it would burn brightly for a while, but in the end it wouldn't matter. Kyle might rage, he might fight, but Victor was unshakable. He had dealt with far more dangerous opponents than Kyle Abbott. Kyle might be furious, but that fury meant nothing. In the grand scheme of things, Kyle was just another piece on the chessboard, one that Victor had moved out of play. And now, with Audra back in charge of Glissade, Victor knew the company was in far more capable hands. The question wasn't whether Kyle would be angry. Of course he would. The question was how long it would take before Kyle realized that his anger was powerless against the might of Victor Newman. And when that realization hit, Kyle would understand the truth. In the world Victor had built, there was no room for weakness, no space for failure, and no one, not even Kyle Abbott, could ever outfox the master. As Victor sat back in his chair, his mind cleared. The decision had been made, and it was the right one. The Newman legacy would continue, stronger than ever, and Kyle's fury, it would be little more than a passing storm, soon forgotten.